Greetings, peeps of the interwebs. Jake here, and so I'm just now getting home from seeing the Superman movie because just now got around to seeing it because been busy with work and other stuff going on. So, anywho, as a whole, I think this movie is fine. It's by no means great. It's by no means horrible either. It's just kind of it's all right. I did not regret seeing the movie, but at the same time, I would have been fine waiting until this movie came out on HBO Max to watch it. Um, but I did want to support James Gunn, who I like, and basically the start of this new DC universe. And that's the main reason why I went out to see it in theaters, is because I want this to succeed. Because I love DC, and if Marvel aren't gonna pull them, like, get their shit together and, like, start making good movies or on a consistent basis like they used to, in my opinion, because Marvel lately have just not been good. So again, if Marvel can't get their shit together and start making good content, then I want DC to, in hopes that if DC starts to really get the ball rolling with their universe, that will force Marvel to step it up and finally be like, oh yeah, we need to start telling good stories again and not just like throw stuff at the screen for the sake of content. But digressing. So, here's some of the things that I think worked in this movie, and then I'll kind of go into some of the things that I think didn't. But as typical fashion, this is going to be kind of all over the place, rambly like usual, and spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, come back after you saw the movie, or if you don't care about spoilers, then just keep on watching. But anywho, so cast. As typical James Gunn fashion, he's really good at casting, and so the cast all around solid. Not really a weak link in the cast at all. Like David Cornsweet, not seeming anything, but I thought he was excellent as Superman. Especially that very hopeful beacon of, light and justice and just doing good things. I thought he nailed it. Him and Rachel Brosnahan, who played Lois Lane, I thought they had good chemistry, and I like their dynamic. So, also visually, I thought it looked really good because it had a very vibrant color palette, unlike Man of Steel, which even though I love that movie, I did not love how Zack Snyder intentionally muted the color palette in that movie, and made it seem, again, I know he was going for that kind of darker, grittier vibe, but Superman should not have been a character to mute colors and go digressing. So I like the color palette, the visuals, even though some of the CGI is, it's not horrible. I've definitely seen better CGI, but as a whole, it wasn't so bad that it took me out of it. Like in some, going back to Marvel, like some Marvel movies and shows. But I think the core, in my opinion, one of the biggest kind of shortcomings for this movie is the fact that it's trying to do so much, and it's kind of it was an unenviable assignment for James Gunn, not only as the studio head, but he was the writer, the producer, and the director of this movie. So he essentially had to make the best movie possible, or not only the best standalone Superman movie, which I do think he did well with telling a standalone narrative. Obviously, yes, there's a lot more going on. He had to do some world building to set up this DC universe and differentiate it from the MCU, and also differentiate it from the previous DC EU. Which Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, all that stuff took place in. And so, again, in that regard, I think he succeeded. It wasn't so. It wasn't filled with clearly setting up for a sequel. It was basically just I'm gonna focus on telling this story and set up some stuff, but I'm not gonna hit you over the head with all right, there's a sequel coming, so I just need to set. That's one thing that a lot of franchises. In particular, franchises that tried to emulate that MCU world building connected universe thing it was so much set up that it was a detriment to the story they were trying to tell. Less so in Superman. There definitely are, again, some of the shortcomings I think came from that, because there is a lot of world building that James Gunn had to establish, and So one of the things that I liked is, so again, in that opening crawl, he established that metahumans have been on Earth for about 300 years. So that really helps establish, like, lays down some of the groundwork for future movies. And again, that was an easy world building thing to just establish, like, opening text without having to do, like, a really long winded, like, monologue from a character or anything like that. However, there is a lot of exposition in this movie. And that can bog down, like, the pace of the movie, and also just gets a little. It's a lot when almost this is a exaggeration, but it seemed like almost like every 3 scenes or something like that, there's some kind of exposition on something, all that stuff. But I think even with, like, some of the world building and, like, the additions of, like, the other metahumans, who I thought were all good, like Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, I really liked. Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl, and Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific, who is definitely a standout. Like, all the reviews, like, are basically saying he was a standout, and I agree. And then also really liked Anthony Carrigan as Metamorpho. And so again, I liked all the other metahuman characters that were introduced, but I think the biggest problem for me is, so Lex Luthor's plan to basically, like, frame, like, Superman, and eventually kind of, like, get the go-ahead to kill him, I thought was just overly complicated. So, again, in that opening crawl, it basically says that Superman, announced himself 3 years ago, and that's when he started doing Superman stuff. And basically, at some point during that period, he intervened in a war between these 2 fictitious countries called Moravia and Jahamapur, or something like that. I can't remember, even though I just saw the movie. But basically, he intervened just because, a war was about to break out, and he's not having that shit, because he's Superman. He does good things. But there's a controversy over this, is because the country of Moravia is apparently an ally of the U.S., whereas the other country was not. And Moravia was about to invade Jamapur, again, whatever its name is. And so some people are kind of criticizing him, of kind of like, well, hey, he's a U.S. representative, because, Superman is a U.S.-based superhero, but, he's like, no, I wasn't there representing the U.S., I was just there as myself, preventing a war, where, hundreds or thousands of people would have died. So that's one thing I like, though, is especially the dynamic with, like, Superman, how he's perceived by different people, where, again, some people are very much, like, in favor of Superman, basically like, hey, yeah, that's cool. He's just doing good things regardless of where he is in the world. He doesn't have any particular, like, allegiance to any one nation or people. He just, if a cat's stuck in a tree, he's going to go save that tree, whether it be in China, the U.S., or, Moravia, or whatever. But at the same time, you can also understand, like, I guess, from a realistic point of view, is regardless of whether you had superheroes like as powerful as Superman, but just any time that they were intervening in, like, world affairs, that could get really complicated and dicey. So I do like that story element. But basically, what started this is Lex Luthor, what apparently kind of manufactured this conflict, because Jamapur has a lot of resources, and so he cut a deal with Barovia. It's like, I'll give you, like, billions of dollars of weapons, you go invade, and then we're basically going to, like, cut up this country where, I'll control this part and its resources, you control that part and its resources. And I think had it been just that would have been a lot more simpler, but apparently it goes even deeper than that. Because apparently Lex Luthor manufactured all this because he was like, I want Superman to intervene, and then once he intervenes and causes all this controversy, I'm going to gradually start turning, like, the U.S. government and other people in general away from Superman, and then show that he's a threat. And once he's shown as a threat, then that's when I can kind of get the go-ahead from the U.S. government to kill him. And totally legit, understandable that, like, Lex Luthor, again, in the comics in every iteration, is always out to get Superman because he deems him a threat. Totally fine, but I just feel like there's so many easier ways they could have, like, streamlined that subplot, instead of him manufacturing this whole, like, conflict that, I don't know, I just felt like that was just overly complicated and could have been simplified, and that would have helped tremendously with this movie, with preventing it from getting bogged down and allowing the story to focus more on other things I think would have been more important. But another thing that I also didn't like is, so apparently Lex Luthor, somehow, he was able to create, like, this pocket dimension. So he has, like, these basically, what looks like airplane turbine engine sort of things, where you basically walk through it and it'll teleport you to his other teleporters, basically, that he has all across the world, and basically whenever you go through one, you're going through this pocket dimension. And in this pocket dimension, he basically has prisoners. So, like, metahumans, political prisoners of, like, basically the political elite that he's kind of, like, in bed with. And so, I don't know, I just thought, like, that was another thing that I found a little overly complicated of, like, I don't know. It just seemed, again, overly complicated, kind of unnecessary. I feel like there could have been an easier way for, like, characters to communicate or go back and forth without going through, like, this pocket dimension teleporter thing. And so, again, I know this is, like, in the realm of comic books, and this is a very comic booky movie, but even in the realm of comic book movies, I still found that to be a little harder to suspend my disbelief, just because it's kind of, there's not a whole lot of explanation of, like, how Lex Luthor created this. It's just kind of like, oh yes, I created these pocket dimensional teleporter things, and that's where I go, you know, to do this, this, and that, and that's where I hold prisoners, and that's where I'm going to hold Superman. It's like, well, how did he come up with this? How long did it take him to come up with this? Because surely that would have taken a very long time. But anyways, yeah, so that kind of, it didn't take me out of the movie, but I just, again, that was harder to suspend my disbelief, as odd as it sounds, even though I totally accept, you know, Superman's from Krypton, and there's metahumans, and different dimensions, and all that stuff, but I don't know. It's maybe nitpicky for me to say that, but again, I just felt like it was a little overly complicated for this movie, and so I think that is my biggest problems, is where this movie feels kind of bloated with, like, these overcomplicated, like, expositions, or just kind of overcomplicating the story as a whole. And so, again, like, as a whole, it's not a bad start to the DCU. I definitely think they could have gone out stronger, but that also would have been really hard to achieve, given the fact that, again, not only did you have to tell a good Superman story, but you also had to tell a, like, clearly establish this new universe and start building it up. And so, again, the Superman elements really work. And then there's another character that was, like, I guess, kind of the big bad that, like, Lex Luthor controlled, that was apparently a clone of Superman called Ultraman. Now, I'm not familiar with Ultraman in the comics, so I don't know if he actually is a clone of Superman in the comics, or if this is something, like, they made just for the sake of the movie. But, I don't know, I thought that was just kind of lame that Ultraman was, like, a clone of Superman the whole time, and their fight was just kind of, I don't know, underwhelming, because it was just, like, your typical big CGI fight of just, like, you know, them flying and punching each other, and you just hear a lot of, like, sound effects of, like, you know, punches and kicks and I-beam flying through buildings and all this stuff, and it just, I don't know, it didn't really do much for me. And I feel like a lot of things were resolved in this movie through, like, kind of conveniences. And again, I know that's a little nitpicky, but I don't know, like, I've seen a lot of, like, I've seen James Gunn's other movies, like Slither, and then the Guardians movies, which I all really enjoy, and I know he's a good writer, so I kind of feel like this is, I don't know, like, this is definitely my least favorite movie that he's done, and I do feel like the writing in some elements isn't as strong as what I've seen him do. So it's definitely not a movie that, like, I'll probably I'll be eager to rewatch. Like, again, I easily could have waited for this movie to come out on HBO Max and watched it, and I probably would have gotten the same level of enjoyment, but I wouldn't have to spend, like $30 on ticket and concessions. Um, so yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of where I am with this movie. Is it didn't leave a strong impression on me. Not like I said, it's not bad, not good, but it's just kind of I'm indifferent towards it. Um, and a part of me kind of wonders if the more I think about this movie, I may end up liking it less just because of some of the unnecessary like bloat of this movie that I feel like could have been like resolved or could have just been like omitted entirely to help streamline the story and make it like a tighter script. But I don't know. It could also go the other way, where maybe the more I think about it and maybe talk to other people about it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's actually a good point. I like your perspective, and that might shift me a little bit more positively. But as of now, I'm kind of indifferent. Like I'm definitely still interested to see where this new DC universe goes. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm excited. It's more, again, I'm interested, but I'm not excited. So those are my rambly thoughts in like a nutshell. Like there's a lot of stuff that I could have talked about, but I'll just keep this video relatively short and not ramble too much. Um, but let me know what you thought about the movie, or have you seen it? Are you gonna bother to see it? Do you look more favorably on this movie, or are you kind of like me, where you're just kind of like, it's fine. I'm not offended by it, but I also didn't have to go see it in theaters. So those are my thoughts. Comment below what you thought, and until next time, everyone, cheers.